Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips, which is brought to you by Wellness Forum Health, the Wellness Forum Institute, and Make Americans Free Again. First, I want to remind everybody this Cancer Summit is coming up in just a few weeks, March 21st and 22nd. I added a Friday night session because there was no way to cover it all on just the Saturday I'd scheduled. In addition to my speaking, we have Daniel Orego, who is going to talk about press pulse therapy and keto diets for advanced cancer and advanced cancer strategies, people who have like stage 3 and stage 4 cancer. Dr. Gracie Yuen is going to talk about water fasting and sympathetic dominance. Avinoam Lerner is going to talk about healing cancer and trauma, the psychobiology of suffering. Kylie Aurora, the psychology of survival, and then survivors and their families and their stories and their journeys. And we'll be adding more and more and more to this. So we already have enrolled a couple hundred people for this. We're going to sell it out. It'd be a good idea to reserve earlier instead of later. I'm excited about it, and I'll share some of the reasons why in today's news announcements. But this is long overdue to talk about how people survive cancer, and I think some of what you hear is going to surprise you a lot. At least I think we specialize in that kind of thing, stuff that surprises people, but is scientifically super accurate. All right, so the first news item I want to talk about is an article I saw on MedPage. It's about a doctor who changed his mind about GLP-1 inhibitors. And I appreciate so much when a doctor is willing to change his mind based on both data and experience. And I have extra admiration for a doc who will do this when a change of heart means going against the medical machine. In this case, the overwhelming enthusiasm for GLP-1 inhibitors. Christopher McGowan describes himself as an obesity medicine specialist and, quote, an early and vocal advocate for GLP-1 therapy to the extent that he spoke publicly about the drugs and their, quote, unprecedented efficacy against obesity. Today, he has a different idea about them. While acknowledging that the drugs work, people who can afford, tolerate, and sustain their use do lose weight. But he notes that this works only to the extent that people can take them indefinitely, and most people do not. The doc reports that research shows that 75% of patients stop GLP-1 inhibitors due to the cost, the side effects, or the unwillingness to take any drug indefinitely. And I don't really think most people want to be on a drug indefinitely. Any progress that has been made is reversed quickly. Research shows that the average patient regains 2/3 of the weight lost within just 1 year of discontinuation, and many regain more than they initially lost. McGowan says its patients report that they feel ravenous and overwhelmed by the return of the mental noise around food that begins shortly after they take the last dose of the GLP-1 inhibitor. He says many patients end up cycling on and off the drugs, and in the end, the only thing they've lost is money, upwards of $12,000 per year if their insurance doesn't cover it. And today, most do not, and increasingly, they're not. McGowan asks if the use of these drugs violates medicine's most basic rule, which is do no harm. He reinforces what I've been saying since this craze began. Patients are actually worse off than they were before they took the drugs. They lose muscle mass while they take them, and muscle mass is generally not recovered when they stop. The weight regained is mostly fat, which means that the patients are metabolically worse off than they were before they even started. One of the worst aspects of this mess is the psychological toll it takes on patients who feel both blame and shame due to yet another failed attempt to lose weight. Their self-confidence is also worse than it was before the expensive debacle began with the drugs. I'll add to this doc's commentary that obesity increases the risk of so many diseases, including cancer, which is sort of the topic we're focused on in the next few weeks. So the impact on patients is greater than just weight regain and the psychological stress associated with it. Just for the record, last year I started teaching a class series titled Winner's Circle, which assists people with habit change and weight loss from a different perspective than usual. The concept is whole life change based on the fact that everything is connected to everything and nothing can change unless everything changes. Now, on the surface, it can seem like, well, gosh, that's a whole lot harder than tackling one problem at a time, but actually it's easier. The more broad the effort is, the more likely it is to be sustained. I started a new class series in January, and I've already been asked by some people who are not in that class if I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to schedule a class series again for spring, and I'll get those dates set shortly. But if you're really struggling with habit change or life change, whether or not it includes weight, and you're interested, send me an email and I'll reply with some basic information about it. Now, the next item is from a subscriber who wrote to me and said, why don't you share with people what you eat in a day? It would be maybe interesting, maybe inspiring. And I'm a pretty open book about what I do, so I'm happy to do that. First of all, I'll mention that I do all my batch cooking on the weekends. So I bake potatoes, I chop up and bake beets for salads, and I'll make a pasta dish and a soup, and maybe a broccoli and rice and vegetables dish or asparagus, whatever looks good at the grocery store or the farmer's market. So it's variable. But I'll give you a typical day. Every day starts for me the same way. I have the Pan Popper smoothie, the smoothie mix, plant milk, tea, the green tea from China, tea flax and yeast, banana and frozen fruit, and I have a piece of toast with fat-free hummus. It's a lot of calories, but the goal is for me to make it from breakfast until lunch, and exercise is usually part of that. I run or take a yoga class or I lift weights, and so pretty action-packed morning, and I'm pretty hungry by lunch. So I come home for lunch and I'll usually I'll warm up some potatoes I baked over the weekend in the microwave, and then I'll make a great big salad with beets and chickpeas and radishes and tomatoes and different kinds of lettuce and spinach. And again, whatever looks fresh and interesting at the grocery store, the farmer's market. And that's lunch. And then I get hungry again about 3:30. I might have a black bean wrap or a bowl of soup, something like that. And then for dinner, a slightly smaller salad, and then vegetables, rice, and tofu dish, or pasta with vegetables, or chili and some sourdough bread, something like that. And then I eat again after I finish work at night, which is at 10 or 11, sometimes later. But I'll have a bowl of cereal or banana or some fruit, something like that. I don't sleep very well when I'm hungry. And research actually shows that you're better off eating something, a little something, before you go to bed than not. So that's what I eat in a day. And I don't know if you find that inspiring or interesting or none of the above, but people do ask me a lot about that. For the record, I eat big portions. I'm a big eater, and sometimes people comment on where you put all that food. But I'm physically active. I'm super lean, and so I'm a high burner. And we can turn all of you into high burners if you want to know how. And it's a whole lot more fun to be a high burner than to watch what you're eating in quantities and all that sort of thing. So anyway, thanks for asking the question. I do try to respond to subscriber questions in the newsletter. So feel free, or in the newsletter and in my videos. So feel free to send an email if you'd like me to answer a question for you. All right, second news item, and this isn't surprising, but the breadth of the effect is a little. Regular exercise, according to a new study, can slow the progression of and reduce the risk of death from cancer. The effect was dose dependent. The more exercise, the better impact it had on patient survival. The study included 28,000 people with stage 1 cancer who were followed from 2007 to 2022. Patients in the low exercise group had 16% lower risk of cancer. Those in the moderate to high physical activity group had a 27% lower chance of progression, cancer progression, than patients who didn't exercise. So if you're lucky enough to be diagnosed with an early stage cancer, one of the ways that you can prevent it from turning into a more advanced cancer is exercise. And then, of course, diet change and the other things that we would also recommend. But by itself, this has an effect. The risk of death was also lower for the physically active, 33% lower in the low physical activity group and 47% lower in the moderate activity group. According to one of the co-authors, exercise had a larger effect than many other modifiable behaviors on survival, such as smoking, obesity, and poor diet. And the more exercise a person engaged in over 60 minutes per week, the greater the protection against, again, that dose-dependent effect that really reinforces the fact that there is an effect. I decided to share this information first because so many cancer patients ask if it's okay to exercise while they're receiving treatment. And many have told us that they've been told by their oncologists not to exercise. Now, to be clear, there are some situations in which exercise could be contraindicated. And we'll talk about that. You'll hear a little bit about that at the Cancer Summit. But in almost all cases, this isn't true, and exercise can be part of a strategic plan for survival. I'll remind you, if you saw Forks Over Knives, there were so many great lines in that film, and I think we might even show it again sometime at one of our Food Over Medicine clubs, because even though it's an older film, it still was the one that started all the movies and documentaries about diet and health. But anyway, you might remember Ruth Heydrich. She was one of the reality patients, and she had been diagnosed with metastasized breast cancer. And survival rates are much lower for patients in this situation. She started eating a plant-based diet and exercising vigorously. In fact, she became a very famous triathlete as a senior citizen. And she said she was told by so many people, Ruth, you're a cancer patient, you should be resting. And her response was, I just knew if I could build a strong body, I could beat this thing. And she did. At the time that she appeared in the film, she'd been cancer-free for almost 3 decades. This reinforces the reason for a cancer summit. Cancer patients and their families are given many times inaccurate and conflicting advice, and sorting it out can be daunting. And so we're going to try to organize all of the conflicting ideas and make them more specific for people. Well, if this particular set of circumstances is going on, you might be better off without so much physical activity, at least for this period of time. Whereas on the other hand, with other situations, exercise can save your life. And one last thing on the topic of exercise, I'm going to teach another virtual yoga series soon because you're writing to me about it. This is going to be a daytime class, to be clear, held on a weekday. And if you're interested in participating in it, I'm thinking like April, May, something like that, send me an email and I'll send you some details. All right, so we have lots of exciting things coming up at Wellness Forum. We're starting new Food Over Medicine groups. If you're interested in forming a Food Over Medicine club, send me an email. Don't forget about our Cancer Summit. Don't forget about all the great things that we have going on that are helpful for you. So once again, my email address is pampopper@msn.com if anything I've said is interesting to you. All right, that's it for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you on Thursday with more news. Thank you for watching.